Well met, everyone. Sir Gemini here from Knight Errant Academy of Chivalry, and we're here in the workshop today showing you the finished product of a practice cudgel made of rattan. On the table you have the various pieces and equipment you need to construct this item. So without further ado, let's get on to the video. Remember, if you have any questions, you can always email me on the link on the YouTube channel, or if you belong to the Facebook group, you can get on the Facebook group and talk to me there. I'm hitting practices all around the Las Vegas area and sometimes around the country. So if you find me there, ask me questions. Happy to help. Always love training and learning from everybody. Let's get to the video.
Warning. The activities and subjects described in this video can be dangerous and should never be practiced without supervision. An adult should be present during every step of activity and construction, so don't do anything dumb, please. Medieval armor and combat can be dangerous, so be safe, train hard, and be knightly.
Well, Matt, so we're going to start off with some of the items you're going to need when you're making a rattan cudgel. So to start off with, obviously, we're going to need the rattan. And the type of rattan, size of rattan, where you can get it from, we're going to go over as we take the first step. It's important to get a good piece, as good as possible. And I will give you a link down below for a supplier. There's a couple that I've used in the past. Some are better than others. So we need to decide, this is going to be a practice sword. And so for it to be a practice sword, we need to decide what type of hand protection we're going to use. Are we going to use gauntlets? If we're going to use gauntlets, we can use a cross guard and make it look like a cross-guarded sword. Or we can use less hand protection and use a basket hilt. This is a high-impact plastic style basket hilt. And once we decide that, because that's going to determine how big of a handle or grip we're going to use for the most part. Next, we need to have a marking device like this Sharpie right here, and I'll show you why. As we get to it, we're going to need a measuring device like that measuring tape right there to know how long we want to make our sword. In this instance, we're going to make an arming sword, so it's going to be a little shorter than most of you are used to, but I like my swords that way. Various types of tape. We have electrical tape, we have Gorilla tape, strapping tape, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and then regular duct tape in colors. We also have some athletic tape over here, which plays a part in the construction and the type of practice sword that this will be. Over here we have closed cell foam. Now, closed cell foam is not like the camping foam that you get as a camping mat from one of the stores, the blue ones or something like that. Closed cell foam is a rubberized type foam. So I will explain. You can get them at Ace Hardware. You can get them a lot of places nowadays. But you want to use a closed cell foam. Above those is a 24 millimeter socket and a 1-inch socket, either of which I use as a little template to carve out a rough circle. And then I smooth them out a little rounder later. And those are for a thrusting tip if you're going to do a sword with a thrusting tip. In my personal opinion, I don't see how or why you would do a sword without a thrusting tip unless it was a specific period one that you were trying to replicate that did not have a thrusting tip used. Otherwise, you're not using the full potential of a blade. Down here, this piece right here is a tennis racket grip tape. And so some people like a little more cushion. Some people like a little better look on their handles rather than just raw rattan. You can go down and to any of the sports stores and get one of those. They're relatively cheap and they provide a little bit of shot comfort. Over here, this is called a draw knife. Now, this particular tool is almost 100 years old. You can buy them now in any big box store, or you can buy them at Harbor Freight or something like that. I've had this one for a very long time. It's been in my family for a long while. And this is what I use to take the initial material off the sides because of the size of rattan I usually get. This right here is an instrument that provides gauging for specific types of rattan combat. So this one right here is designed for SEA combat. And with it, It gives you nice gauges on the width of what a sword width should be, the gauge of what the cage material should be on a helm, and things like that. It's a really good tool, and I'll put the links to everything down below. You're gonna need something to cut it with, and just a regular small wood cutting saw is good. And you'll see this is a hard tooth rasp as well. You'll see I do some of the fine tuning on the handles with this rasp, which is a great help to get that nice walnut shape that you want, almond shape I should say, that you want on the handle, because you want the handle to be as much like a medieval sword handle as possible. And then over here, this is a luxury. This luxury is a small little belt sander. I have a larger one, but for what I'm doing for just basic fine tuning stuff, this one works just fine. I don't use it very often. It's a luxury. It's not something you need. You can hand sand things. You can just rasp them. But for the most part, you should be fine. So these are your basic materials. As I said, I'll try to put a list of everything down in the footnotes of this video. But these are your basic materials for a basic sword. There's a lot to it, actually. And there's a lot to the technique of making a very good, solid one that's going to not only last as much as possible, but it's also going to treat it like a facsimile of a real blade. And that's what you want. You want to be able to orientate that. So you can pick up either steel or a waster like this and use the same mechanics, the same hand motions, everything. All right, beginning with rattan, this is going to be your base material for what you're going to be using. Rattan is a cousin to a bamboo. It is a grass. It's not a hardwood. So you can see right here, those small little filaments, this is a grass. So it has the benefit of when it starts to break down, it won't shatter. It'll just broom up, get soft and mushy. And this is great because then if it starts peeking through any of the tape or anything like that, it won't cause an eye injury to anyone. I've gotten my rattan from quite a few sources. Berkeley, California has a rattan shop, the Cane Shop, and for years I got my stuff from them. Over the last few years, I get my stuff from Frank's Cane and Rush, and they're out of Huntington Beach, California, and I'll leave a link. Not only does Frank's provide some of the best pieces of rattan I've ever used, but their customer service is fantastic, and they go out of their way to make sure. They do little things like grinding off the edges of the growth rings on the rattan. They even, I don't know if you could see that, but they even carve the edges off a little bit to keep them from cutting the box as it's being transported. So Frank's is a fantastic company. I don't get any endorsements from them. You want to make sure the rattan is as straight as possible, as fresh as possible, that it doesn't have any bug holes in it. Now, bug markings are like these little markings right here, and that's fine. If it's a little scarring on the top, that doesn't hurt anything. When it's bored into the piece itself, that's going to cause a structural weakness, and it'll cause it to degrade a lot faster. I wanted to show you what happens to the rattan as it degrades. So this was a fighting cudgel that I've used for a little bit, not very long, but I tend to go through them pretty quick. And as you can see here, how it's getting broomed out, how the fibers are all separating. Getting a little mushy right there. And what happens is when you strike, whatever you contact on your opponent is going to have that little bit of flex. And the more you smush it down, the more flex it's going to have. You see here at the very end what happens to it. It really starts to broom out. But this is the beauty of rattan. When it starts to degrade, it won't shatter. Because it's part of the grass family, it just brooms out like this. So it's a lot safer for you. It's a lot safer for your opponents. And, you know, it's not absolutely reusable, but one of the things you can do, like for instance, I will take these and I'll make smaller, shorter weapons out of them, or practice things. So this one particularly down right to about right here is where it's starting to split. So if I cut it off, right here, I have a good 2 feet of rattan left with a perfectly good and serviceable handle. So for this, I could make a dagger. I could make several different types of weapons with it. I want to give you a cross section of the handle. As you can see, I talked about that almond shape. This is the shape we're going to try to achieve, right? And why we want to achieve that is because it's giving us clear blade orientation. When we put our hand on this, where that grip sits, where that almond shape sits right here, in that bend of our fingers tells us exactly where that blade is at all times. We never want to hit flat. We always want to hit on the edge. And so we know if it's between my thumb and my palm, that's the back blade. If it's between the bend in the joints of my fingers, that's the front of the blade. And so when I grip on this sword, I know exactly where my blade orientation is. Okay, so it's very important to begin with getting a good piece of rattan that is the proper width. Every organization is different, but you want to at least have 1.25 inches of width on that weapon, because most organizations have a 1-inch minimum width in the faceplate or grill of the helmets that everybody uses. You don't want this going in and smacking somebody in the face. This is rattan. It's lighter than a hardwood. When you tape it and add the things that we add to it, it becomes pretty comparable weight. Getting hit with this will cause a huge amount of damage to somebody if they are not armored properly, and hitting them in an unarmored location like the face is really going to do some damage. So we have a couple things. As I mentioned before, we have this gauge here, and this is minimal distance. This is going to give us 1.25 inches width, and as you can see, we're good. So as long as we have that 1.25 inches, we know that we're within spec. Now remember, tape's going to allow for a little bit too. The other thing you can use is a caliper, right? You can do the same thing. You can get your distance right here, pull it up, and you've got a good, precise measurement. Okay, don't take this for granted. I've seen a lot of swords out there that are less than 1.25 inches, and people like to use them because they're lighter. They're a lot lighter, and people think that it makes them faster, and therefore faster makes them better, or they will win the combat. Okay, don't do that, right? Number one, it's cheating. And number two, you're not doing your technique any favors. You're going to try to have to use a lot more muscle to move a lighter weapon and connect with the same type of calibration that somebody like me is used to receiving. So use a good solid piece and make sure that everything is the proper width and spec. And if you're out there running a practice, make sure you inspect weapons every single time. Inspect those weapons, because you want to make sure everybody out there is safe. Okay, now that we've got a good piece of rattan, we've marked it, we've checked it, we know exactly how wide it is, how much we want to take off to make a good weapon. We want to orientate the weapon. So what we want to do is we want to look down this weapon and we want to see where it curves. The weapon itself is going to curve one way, the other way, or whatever. When you find this curve, for instance, right here, you can see it's curving off to my left, or to your left. Curve is straight up, curve to the right. It's not a lot on this one because, like I said, Frank's gives good quality stuff. So we're going to take this piece of rattan, and wherever that curve is, we're going to orientate it up, straight up like this. Okay, it's curved to the right. We're going to bring it straight up and down, straight down the line at us like this. And here, we're going to put an arrow straight up. That way we always know what the blade orientation looks like. Now that we have our rattan placed, I want to mention that this is another real luxury, having a vise. Now, if you notice, my vise is actually put onto the trailer hitch. I can remove it. I can take it with me to practices a lot. So I can help people there do repairs on their armor. I have a lot of experience helping with that sort of thing, and I like to be as helpful as possible when I'm there. And so having this is a real luxury. I'll put a link to it and the plate. I have another one that actually goes up higher as well. But this is a real luxury to have an extra set of hands, essentially to hold on to things is much safer. You want to make sure that you always do your cutting with eye protection, and that if you are not 18 or never used a saw before, have somebody that does know how to use the equipment, use it. Don't do it if you don't know how. Learn how properly so you can do it yourself. But don't take it on if you've never done it before. Okay? So I'm going to cut this sword to 30 inches. And I'm sure there's a ton of people out there going, that's too short. Well, I've always used really short swords. When I first started, people told me, you could never, do anything with a short sword. Well, you can if it's the proper weight. And then I've also heard that, you could never win any tournaments or anything with a short sword or a mace or anything like that. Well, for those of you who know me or know anything about me, you know that, well, we proved that wrong, didn't we? Several times, and have for a couple decades, 3 decades now. So you're only as good as your weapons, and you're only as good as your training. But this isn't a magic bullet, right? Anything you do to this is only going to be as good as how you train with it. So make it as good as you can, make it as comfortable as you can, so when you get out there, you're not fighting the weapon, you're not fighting your armor. That's a whole nother show. We'll talk about that later. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and measure this out and get this cut. You notice I'm shortening this down to almost right at the cut point, and that's because I don't want it to wobble. The further out you are, the more the material is going to wobble. Closer you are to it, the less it's going to wobble. Now, I have eye protection on. I've done this quite a bit. I know what I'm doing. And so even with all that, you can see how slow I'm starting. Just try and get a bite. Once I get that bite, I can go ahead and cut through, but I'm not doing it until I get a nice bite. There we go. Remember, this material is made of fiber, and it won't biting like a hardwood will. So you've got to take a little time. I've got that. I'm going to finish it off here. You can see. There you go. Now, an important point right here. I cut this off, and this edge now is very, very sharp. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rasp this round, because if I don't, when I put tape on it, it's going to cut through the tape a lot easier. So you want to round off every edge you cut anytime. You want to round that off. You can see I have an arrow pointed, and this means that the swoop was going up. Now that I've cut that off, it's a pretty straight piece all the way around. But that's not always going to be the case, so you want to make sure you orientate it correctly. Here, we want to make sure that we're going to cut off the sides of this rattan, here and here. And we don't want to take off a bunch. We want to just take it off really slowly and then plane it down to the width that we want, right at about 1.25 inches. Tape's going to build it up just a little bit, so we don't need to take too much off. The skin is the hard part of the rattan, and it's the protector of the rattan from the outside elements, bugs, that sort of thing. So we're going to carve this skin off just slightly and flatten these edges out so we can get a nice blade side and a nice flat side of the rattan. Make sure we're just right at horizontal here. Just get enough. We just want to get a bite. We don't want to crush the rattan or squeeze it, crack it, or anything. Here we're going to take our draw knife. Now remember, the draw knife itself is just going to bite into that rattan here on the edge and pull it up. This is very sharp. You want it very sharp. A lot of people don't have these. I've been using this for a very, very long time, but a lot of people don't have them. You can do the same thing with a sander. You can do the same thing with a plane. You can do the same thing with even a table saw, or you can leave it round. You don't have to do it like this, but what I found that I like the best is to use this type of draw knife. Don't use it if you don't know how. Remember, it's very sharp. Remember, wear the proper eye protection and protection when you're using this type of thing. So take this, just get maybe an eighth of an inch. And that's all we want to take off to start off with, just that little bit of the rattan right there. What that's going to do is it's going to start to make that flat edge right there. You have to be patient with it. Do it a little at a time. And what'll happen is you'll get this nice flat line. And we want to get it almost to the complete width of the side of the rattan here. So I'm going to get back on this and start taking it down slowly, and then I'll show you when we get it done. Another tool I want to show you here is a planer tool. This, if you don't have access to a draw knife, can be a fantastic use for shaving down the sides. It's relatively safe and very inexpensive. You can get one of these at the big box stores for under $20. It looks like this, and it has a blade right here that will only take down a certain depth. And as long as you go slow and just push along, it'll only take that depth off, and you can take just a little bit off at a time and get yourself a nice flat planed surface. If you're not skilled with a draw knife, this is a fantastic option. It takes a little bit longer, but it's nice and it's much safer. Again, use eye protection and go slow, but this can be a fantastic option for getting the sides down to the width that you want. And I'll show you a little bit right here. We've got a nice even flat surface. Take the planer, put it down, and you're going to feel it bite just a little bit. Push your front hand down and just glide along. You can adjust the depth of this. And does really well. You can get a nice even line down here, and just keep cutting away at it. Just go slow, and it's a nice clean way to do your lines. All right, so we've done a little bit more with the planer off of the drawing eye, and we've got it just about where we want it. So we take our gauge, or you take your caliper or measuring tape, whatever you need. You want to make sure that runs down. And as you can see, we're just right at 1 1/4 inch. We've got less than a 1/16. So by the time we tape it, that whole thing is going to be right. All right? Everything is going to be right where it's supposed to be. See, it drags it just a little bit. That means you're right at 1 1/4 inch. So anything you add to this is going to add to its width and keep it even more safer so it doesn't get into anybody's grills. You can see how clean the plane is on both sides. Finishing it up with that planer is really the way to go. You can do the entire thing with a planer. I decided to, once I did a few strokes with that draw knife, I wanted to see how good it would be, because I've never done an entire one with a planer, and it went smooth as butter. So you go down to yourself a $12, $14 planer from one of the big box stores, and you are set. So next we got to make the handle. This one, I already have a working blade right now that has a cross guard, to which I'm using the gauntlets to work with. For this one, we're going to use a basket hilt. So you need to put the basket hilt on here, and then we're just going to take a measurement from here to there. And what that's going to do is it's going to show us pretty much where we want to make that almond shape for our blade. Now, anywhere in between here is where we're going to go ahead and make our handle. And we make that, I make it with a draw knife, a little bit of the planer, and a lot of work with the rasp. You can use a sander and just have a big belt sander and grind it along there. That's totally fine too. I kind of like having a more tactile approach to how I make my stuff. But as long as you get it down, don't leave it round. Don't leave it round. One more time for everybody in the back. Don't leave it round. Okay? A round sword handle does a couple of things. Number one, it gives you absolutely no blade orientation. And you never know whether you're throwing flat or on edge just by the feel of the grip. That's terrible. It's terrible swordsmanship. It's terrible sword work. Don't do it. The other reason is if somebody's using this that has a smaller hand and they try to put their hands around this big piece of rattan, it is not going to work for them. They're going to be gripping it tighter to try to hold on to it. And the harder you have to grip onto this sword when you're using it for sword work, the more tired your arm's going to be. And you're literally going to fatigue from your fingertips back. Okay? Don't get in the habit of being lazy and doing that. Do it right. Build it correctly. Take pride in what you do. Make sure all of your equipment is correct. If you do that, then everything you pick up is going to feel good. You're going to be out there and you're going to be ready to concentrate on that training. If it's not, everything's going to be a hassle. That goes for armor, shields, clothing, undergarments, everything. Okay? So make this priority. Make this handle exactly how you want it. And you're going to mess up. Rattan's cheap for relatively. So it's okay to do that. It's all right to mess up as long as you... And you can fix things. If you make it a little too narrow, you can put some tape on there. You can put some tennis racket grip tape on there, beef it up a little bit. There's lots of things you can do to build that grip back up, as long as you don't go too far and it's too far gone. And you'll know because eventually it'll just snap off right there. But it's rattan, so it's not going to hurt you. But play with it. Don't be afraid to take the basket hilt off and recut it, reshape it. Don't be afraid. Okay? All right, so I'm going to get to shaping this and we'll check back in. Okay, so we're going to be doing our thrusting tip. Now, I know there's some bias out there, some old school bias. Oh, we don't put thrusting tips on the swords. You're going to find on this channel, on my channel here, you're going to find I have a lot of opinions. And I want you to understand that my opinions are not based on just some sort of unsubstantiated bias when it comes to things about fighting, equipment, all that stuff, okay? I have been studying, practicing, and using practical application of the Western style martial arts, specifically in medieval Europe, since 1995. And I have experienced and been privileged enough to be a part of many, many, many different groups, organizations, tournaments, fights, backyard brawls, you name it. And I've seen a lot of things over the years, and so I ask you to, with an open mind, take stock of some of these opinions that I have about armor, weapons, the ideals of chivalry, rule sets, all that stuff. You're going to hear a lot of it because, well, I don't really have a filter when it comes to that stuff. So be prepared with the upcoming videos. That's kind of just how I am. So use a thrusting tip on your sword. Unless it was a very, very early period sword of a very specific type of sword, it had a thrusting tip. And the ability to use a thrust properly, that's a whole different thing. But the ability to use a thrust properly is not only important, but essential to using the entire weapon. Okay, so for this, on a rattan cudgel, we're going to use closed cell foam. Closed cell foam is a rubber-based elastic type foam. If you get it online or if you go into a store like Ace Hardware or something like that, make sure it is closed cell foam. Open cell foam is like that blue camp mat you get at some of the box stores. You don't want that because it'll break down, flatten, and it remains flat. The rubber components in this gives it the elasticity to bounce back. Now, 1/2 inch is acceptable, I think, in some places. I prefer at least 1.25 inches. Again, using our trusty gauge here, we have more than 1.25 inches. We're going to use a piece of nylon webbing. You can get this at Michael's, Tandy, those places right here. And we're going to cut it to about the width of the rattan. That's why I like this one with the little ridges on it. Now it's the width of the rattan. Take our 2 pieces and put it on. Put our webbing right in the middle on the bladed sides. Okay? On the bladed sides. Just like that. Try to get it as even as possible. If anything, if you're going to favor a side, favor the true blade side, not the false blade or the back blade. And then we're going to tape it up. And we're going to tape it up with filament strapping tape. Okay, we're going to tape this up now. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some filament strapping tape. Filament strapping tape has fiberglass filament in it. Packaging tape. You get it online. But it's a very, very strong base tape for our weapon here, our sword. And it's going to keep things from breaking. A lot of tape will break. This filament here is super, super strong. So on impacts, it won't break. And what we're going to do is we're going to go across, over, and diagonals all the way around it. And then we're going to swirl it down all the way basically to where our basket hilt is going to sit. Okay, moment of truth here. So I've seen over the years a lot of ways to put on basket hilts and other things to rattan weapons. I've seen everything from, oh God, leather straps sewn on. I've seen even to the inglorious pipe clamps. Don't use those. Don't use anything else but this filament tape. Okay. Pipe clamps break. They break all the time. They're rigid. They're small. They're thin. They're not strong. Don't use them. I'm going to show you how to do, how to strap something on here. It won't come off. It will bloody never come off. So this is how it is done to make sure that the weapon is safe, secure, and doesn't ever come off. Unless you have something like really bad inclement weather, it gets so soggy it slips off or something like that. Rarely does this happen. So on the back side of the weapon, we're going to do that one first because we want it to be right at the edge of the sword, right here. Now, how you mount your basket hilt is up to you. I cant mine a little bit to my right, just to open it up a little bit more. You can put yours straight up and down, however you want to do it. I tend to cant mine just a couple of degrees to the right. Probably means nothing, but to me it's important. Put one flat run around the base. Okay? Then bring the tongue up, and with that, add that strap around. Now hold it tight, pull it tight, and put it on there. See how it's canted just a little bit to the right. Over. And you're going to make a couple of really, hold it still, make a couple of really tight wraps. Now here's where the magic comes in. Draw out the tape and spin it. I can just let it spin like this. All right, spin it. If you spin it right, you'll get the sticky end. And take that and wrap it like rope. Because that's essentially what it is, the fiberglass rope. You can even kitty it up around the corners here, it doesn't really matter. Draw a little more out, spin it. And again, make it like rope. Do it again. Pull tight. Really get that on. Do it a few layers. Once you get a nice, good, thick layer on there, go back to the sticky side, do your final wrap. Cut it off. And there you go. That will not come off. Now, the added thing about this is if you ever have to take this off to do a repair, or it comes off for some reason, you cut it off, wrap it up again. You're not looking for a pipe clamp. Same thing with the top tang. Flat first, bring the tongue up, pull tight. Now on this one, you're going to do your rope trick again. Let it drop, spin it. Feed itself, then come over to the front of the tang and pull it back. Do the same thing on the other side. Go to the front of the tang, pull it back. Get a good solid wrap. You're essentially wrapping this up with a filament cord. And it really will hold that sword down. It won't slide on you or move. Once you get it down, command the flat side again. Make it nice. And then you can finish that gap on your sword wrap. There it is. Final product, ready to go to fighter practice, which I will be going to tomorrow night. If you have any questions, I have an email link on the YouTube channel. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, or if you want to be part of the Facebook group, I'll put the Facebook group down as well. I can answer any questions you have. If you happen to be at a practice that I'm at, please come up. I usually have materials with me. I can help fix something that's wrong with yours if you need it, give you advice, help you tweak it a little bit to make it work for you. Don't be shy. I think a large part of what people do when they first start off that hinders them is they settle. Don't settle. Take the time to practice. Take the time to adjust things. Take the time to make it to where it fits you to a point. I mean, there's things that you have to overcome as far as technique and as far as your level of prowess. But the basics of what you're comfortable with to start with, that's something that you should pay close attention to. So catch me at a practice. Email me, DM me on the Facebook group if you belong to that. And well met, everybody. Hope you have a great day.